Okay, think about that perfect cup of coffee. You know, the one where everything just clicks. The flavor, the aroma,
Yeah, absolutely. That harmony.
a huge part of getting there, of unlocking all that potential in the bean, happens way before brewing. It's in the roast.
Exactly. And today we're diving into, well, a really critical moment in that process, a very audible one,
The first crack.
the first crack. We've got some great material here that really breaks down this key stage. And the idea is to understand why this, like popping sound, is so important for all the different coffees we enjoy.
Right. It sounds a bit like popcorn, doesn't it, if you've ever been near a roaster?
It really does.
And that's our focus. Think of this as getting under the hood to see how that sound connects to whether your coffee ends up bright and fruity or, deep and more chocolatey. It's all tied to first crack.
Before we get right into the crack itself, maybe let's set the scene just a little.
Yeah.
Green coffee beans. They're raw, right?
Raw, yeah. Not much coffee about them at that point.
Exactly. They're dormant. They don't have the flavors or smells we associate with coffee. Roasting is what brings all that out.
Okay, so roasting, it's applying heat, obviously, but it's not just like baking a cake. It's more controlled, a sequence of changes.
Precisely. It's about managing heat to trigger specific chemical reactions carefully. It develops the flavor, the aroma, even the texture.
And it happens in stages.
Yeah, step by step. First, there's a drying phase. You got to get rid of that initial moisture.
Makes sense.
Then you hit the Maillard reaction. That's a big one.
Maillard, that's where like sugars and amino acids react, creates all those complex compounds.
That's the one. Hundreds of them.
Think-
Flavor and aroma. Then comes caramelization.
Which is more about the sugars breaking down on their own. Sweetness, depth.
You got it. Adding complexity. And
Yes.
then the main event for us today. First crack. The beans actually audibly expand. They release energy.
Okay. And there's a second crack too sometimes for darker roasts.
Yeah, that happens later, higher temperatures. But first crack, that's often called a pivotal moment, a real milestone in the roast.
Pivotal. Okay. So let's get into it. What is the first crack fundamentally? It's got to be more than just a noise.
Oh, absolutely. It's a crucial point where you have major physical and chemical changes happening together. Usually kicks off around 196 Celsius, maybe 385 Fahrenheit.
But that can vary a bit.
It can, yeah. Depends on the bean, the roaster type, things like that. Our sources confirm that.
So the beans are heating up. What's going on inside that makes them suddenly pop?
Well, think about the water still inside the bean. As it heats up, it turns to steam.
Creates pressure.
Exactly. A lot of internal pressure builds up. At the same time, the heat is weakening the bean cell walls. It's like a tiny pressure cooker reaching its limit.
Ah, okay. So the structure can't hold it anymore.
Precisely. When that pressure overcomes the strength of the cell walls, the bean physically cracks open.
And that releases the steam.
Releases the steam, yeah. And also carbon dioxide that's been forming, plus some energy. That outward burst makes the popping sound we hear.
The first crack sound. Got it. And what are we seeing physically? The bean itself is changing.
Definitely. You'll see the beans puff up, expand quite noticeably. They also get lighter because they've lost water weight.
And the chaff, that flaky skin.
That starts to come off, yeah. Sheds the chaff. And importantly, this moment signals the transition. We're moving from a light roast profile into a medium roast.
Okay, that makes sense. We hear it, we see it change. But why is this specific moment so critical for the final coffee? What makes it the pivotal point?
Right, this is key. It matters for several big reasons. First, flavor development really hits its stride around first crack.
How so?
Those reactions we mentioned, Maillard and caramelization, they're kind of peaking or getting really active.
Yeah.
This creates that sought-after balance in flavor. You start getting, fruit notes, baby chocolate, nutty flavors, caramel sweetness. It's all developing rapidly right then.
So it's not just any flavor, but a certain kind of desirable complexity and balance emerges.
Exactly. It's a sweet spot for developing a lot of positive attributes. Second, the bean structure changes
We said it expands.
and it becomes more porous, much more porous. This is super important for later when you brew it.
Because the water needs to get in and extract the flavor.
Precisely. Better porosity means more effective, even extraction, so it's setting the stage for a better cup down the line.
Clever. Okay, what else?
Third, for the roaster, hearing that first crack is a vital signpost. It's a key cue, auditory and visual, to telling them where they are in the roast.
Helps them decide when to stop.
Absolutely, based on the profile they're aiming for. And fourth, don't forget the smell.
The aroma.
When those beans crack, they release a burst of volatile aromatic compounds. that amazing smell of freshly roasted coffee. First crack contributes significantly to that.
That intense wave of coffee smell you get in your roaster.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned second crack earlier. How different is that?
Very different, and it's important to distinguish them. First crack, like we said, marks the beginning of the medium roast territory. Think balanced acidity, brighter flavors, lighter body.
Okay. And second crack?
Second crack happens quite a bit later if the roast continues. Higher temps, maybe around 224C, 435F. This signals you're entering dark roast territory.
What changes then?
The character shifts again. You get much richer, heavier body. Acidity drops way down. And you start getting more bitter notes. Sometimes smoky, roasty flavors become dominant.
So it's a different profile entirely.
Completely. And our sources point out many specialty roasters choose to stop the roast, very soon after first crack finishes.
To keep those brighter origin flavors.
Exactly. Preserve the bean's inherent character. But others push on toward or even into second crack deliberately to get those darker, bolder notes. It's all about the target profile.
So the roaster is actively listening, watching, and using these cracks to, sculpt the coffee's final taste.
That's a great way to put it. Sculpting the flavor. It's a spectrum. If you stop the roast almost immediately when first crack starts or just as it ends,
You get a light roast.
yeah, often highlights the bean's natural acidity, maybe floral notes, fruity notes, really lets the origin speak.
And if you go a bit longer, developing through first crack.
That gets you into that medium roast zone. More balance, maybe more sweetness, a bit more body, but still retaining some brightness.
The crowd pleasers often.
Often, yeah, and then pushing further towards second crack.
That's your dark roasts. Bold, maybe smoky, heavier feel.
Right. Each stopping point is a choice, emphasizing different facets of what that bean can offer.
It's fascinating how much hinges on that popping sound. Are there things that influence when it happens or how intense it is?
Oh, definitely.
Oh.
Several factors. A big one is the bean itself.
The variety, origin.
Exactly. Different beans have different densities, different moisture levels to start with. This changes how they absorb heat. A denser bean, for example, generally takes a bit longer, needs more energy to get to that internal cracking point.
Stands to reason. More stuff to heat up.
Pretty much. Then there's the roasting machine. Drum roasters, air roasters, even the little home roasters. They all transfer heat slightly differently.
Okay, so the equipment matters.
It does. And the environment too, actually. Ambient temperature in the room, humidity, even altitude can play a small role.
Wow, okay. Subtle factors.
But maybe the biggest influence is the roaster's plan, the roast profile.
Meaning the temperature settings they use over time. Airflow.
Exactly that. How fast they raise the temperature, when they apply more or less airflow, that controlled profile is probably the most significant factor the roaster manages. It's where the real craft comes in.
So many variables. It really shows it's not just apply heat and wait. There's skill there.
Absolutely.
Now, for listeners maybe curious about trying this at home, any practical tips related to first crack?
Good question. If you're trying home roasting, yeah, a few things. First, you really want to track the bean temperature if you can. A thermometer helps you anticipate when first crack might be coming.
Okay, monitor the temp.
Second, listen carefully. Train your ears for that specific popping sound. It's usually pretty distinct once you know what you're listening for.
Right, don't mistake other noises for it.
Third, try to keep the heat even. You want all the beans roasting at roughly the same rate. Avoid scorching that just adds bad flavors.
Evenness is key.
And finally, experiment. Don't be afraid to stop batches at slightly different points after first crack starts. Maybe just as it finishes, maybe 30 seconds later, a minute later, see what you prefer.
Find your own sweet spot.
Exactly. It's the best way to learn what those changes actually taste like.
That's great advice. Really practical. Okay, so wrapping this up. First crack isn't just some random noise. It sounds like it's truly a defining moment.
It really is transformative. It marks massive shifts inside that little bean, both physically and chemically.
And those shifts directly shape the flavor, the aroma, the body, basically the coffee's whole personality in the cup.
Couldn't have said it better. It's a key indicator of roast level and character development.
So maybe next time you brew your coffee, you can pause for a second and just appreciate that journey, that little pop that had to happen.
Yeah, it connects you to the process, doesn't it?
It does. And maybe think about it, if this coffee was stopped just before the crack or right at it or just after, how might it taste different? It adds a whole new layer to enjoying that cup.
Definitely food for thought. Or coffee for thought.